To really look at three things. One, do we need to change our structure as we move forward with the opening of Battle and the restructuring of our middle school configuration? That was the first thing. The second item, the other two items, were to look at our bus rider eligibility policies. And I think Amy Pascalia made a comment about charging. We are required to provide transportation to all of our students at a certain mileage. I think that's what, 3 miles? 3.5 miles. So any student that lives beyond 3.5 miles, by state law, we're required to provide transportation. As a district, we're much more generous than that. Currently, we provide our elementary and middle school students transportation free of charge to the families if they live outside of a mile. And then those upper secondary grades, 8, 9, 12, is over 2 miles. And so we were also asked as a committee to look at that policy because we're changing our grade configuration. And I'm going to be saying that a lot because the grade configuration change, the opening of Battle, and the length of our day in middle school has changed. So we really are unable to compare apples to apples. You're kind of comparing apples to what apples may look like next year, but then we have a big change. So we are in for a change. In May of 2012, the committee had recommended to the board that the board move forward to look at a 3-tiered structure. And one thing I want the public to understand is that the board is, we don't just operate without input and kind of some direction. And so the committee said, yeah, let's pursue this 3-tiered system. It looks like it's a good system. We understand the challenges facing our transportation concerns here in the district. Our current system does not work. And for those of you that are unaware of this, we have several buses that share grade levels. So you can pick a 6th grader up that goes to Smithton, and then they might drop an 8th grader off at West, and then an 11th grader off at Hickman, or in reverse order. And that is highly inefficient and ineffective. It causes discipline problems on our buses, and it causes parents to say, I'm not putting my kid on the bus. And so we want to increase our ridership to those students who are eligible to ride our buses. We also started the year off, this year, what was that, Dr. Bourne, 25 drivers short?
Total of 25 counting sub-drivers short.
So 25 drivers short. As our folks from First Student can attest, driving a bus is probably one of the more challenging jobs to fulfill long term. We only guarantee them about 5 hours because they ride 2 shifts. And so if you're raising a family or you're trying to make ends meet, we know 5 hours with the pay that they're receiving, even if it's pretty decent for the job, you can't support a family. And so we wanted to better utilize our resources potentially. So that's kind of the direction that the committee gave to the board. Then the board said to administrative staff, hey, let's go out and seek public input. And so we had a big World Cafe. And just by a show of hands, who in this room went to the World Cafe in October of 2012? Now keep your hands up. Who received an invitation and chose they couldn't go, whatever. Come on, more of you don't receive an invitation. There you go, okay. So we had that World Cafe in 2012 in which committee members, board members were table facilitators. And we posed these questions to our public about the 3-tiered system and start times, and I think that was the first news report, if I'm not mistaken, of, oh, we're going to start at 6:50 a.m. or something like that. And we put proposals out there because we really wanted people to discuss this, and discussion we did receive, which is awesome. So that all happened in October. The committee re-met several times, and the committee did talk about the research. And based on some of the emails that I received, I think to suggest that our committee made up of highly professional staff in our district that we disregarded research is just not the case. We looked at that. And we came up with the idea of putting out a survey to parents. Was it perfect? No, but it was a tool. And we wanted to gain input. We did it to parents, staff, students, and community members, if I'm not mistaken. And that survey was open online for about 2.5 weeks. And we looked at that information and we talked about that information. That was one aspect of the recommendation that the committee came up to talk about to the board. okay? And so really the committee made two decisions in our meeting just last week. The first decision was, we know we need to move to a three-tiered system. That's what the committee believed. So when I say we right now, I'm talking about the committee, because this is a committee report. Because we do have a finite amount of resources in this district. And we know that we can optimize resources if we transport our students on a three-tiered system. We won't need as many buses, we won't need as many routes, we can make our routes more efficient, we won't have kids sharing and transferring buses. And that same student that goes from Smithton and West and Hickman, one of those kids may get off at Smithton on the ride home and get on another bus to ride home. So we want to eliminate all that. But we're all doing it, putting the needs of kids first. And in a three-tiered system, if we know that we don't want to get out too late at night, we know we have to start at a certain time in order for that to happen. But then we also know no one really wants to start early in the morning. So we all appreciate that, and nothing has been finalized, nothing has been decided, nor is anything going to be decided tonight. So that's where the committee stood last week, and we went forward with this recommendation of what you've all seen, and we've all heard your opinions, and so you are aware, we have heard positive comments on the order. I don't really think anybody is highly in favor of the 7:20 start time. But there are a lot of people that are in support of the timeline of high school, middle school, elementary. And we as board members have heard from some of those individuals. And so we also decided as a committee and talked about it, and even as a board, over the last 15 months, that no matter what is decided, we will receive negative feedback, and we understand that. And it's not about making parents happy. And some of the emails I received like, you shouldn't worry about making parents happy. And we don't want to try to make parents happy from a popularity contest, but we also understand that when you're raising a family, and I have 2 children, Helen has a child, Jim's got some kid that plays basketball, you probably heard of him, Jim Witt, you know. Darren has, Jonathan. Okay.
I am so very
That's
proud.
good. Jonathan doesn't. You know, there's a family dynamic there, you know, and so, again, it's about children's education, but there's also, we pride ourselves on open engaging with our families too. I mean, that is priority. That is a priority in our schools. So that's kind of where the committee stood. And that's where we are, the recommendation before us. And so I want to make sure that before we go to the slideshow, and I think it might be in the slideshow, but some slight changes to this year. On our websites now, some of our junior highs, the one my son attends, actually starts at 3 or 8 and gets out at 2:45. That's what, a 6-hour and 45-minute day. Now all 6th through 8th graders next year will go 7 hours and 10 minutes. And you might not think that that 10 minutes is significant, but in reality, for those 8th graders, at that school, it's really a 25-minute longer day now. 10 minutes in transportation is huge, right, Dr. Bourne? Because we need 10 minutes to load and unload, 30, 40 minutes to run your route. And as we move forward in this discussion, we will be able to hopefully get even more detailed information from the first student about exactly how long the routes will be, so that we can tweak those start times even more. So I think as we end the discussion tonight, in the future, after we talk as a board, we might be better off talking in ranges of start times versus exact start times.
How much do we spend on the bus contract?
Budgeted, this year's budget is $10.7 million, but keep in mind that includes all of our after-school trips, those kinds of things. So total budget transportation for Coney Public Schools is $10.7.
It's a little bit disturbing to hear we're spending $10 million on something that we admit is seriously broken. I mean, that's a real challenge. You guys have done some incredible work. I mean, I wish you guys had appointed me like 2 months from now instead of 2 months ago. But you guys have really done some incredible work, and I applaud all of the committee and all of the work that's been done. I've got to tell you, I did not get a single comment from anybody over the last couple of months that supports this recommendation.
I will agree with that tenfold.
That weighs heavily on me. And I fear that if we don't pay attention to the research about what teenagers' learning styles and cycles and sleep cycles and all that, and if we don't listen to the elementary school teachers and principals who have anecdotal evidence that kids don't do as well in a later cycle model, I think we're missing out on something. And short of drawing a line in the sand, I'm uncomfortable supporting a recommendation that doesn't have the elementary schools in either the second or the first tier.
But this is affecting not just the students that are on buses, but students that have band and music, both of which I was at high school early for. It's the data over and over again. I have not seen a single report or any evidence that shows that starting high school times earlier benefits. Everything I've seen, the later we can start a high school well, I don't know about the later, but later than 7:20, I'm sure we'll have a benefit, not only with test scores, but I even saw one report that suggested that traffic accidents decreased between 16 to 18-year-olds because when they were on the road, they were more alert. So there's so much evidence to show that the order on this needs to change. That's my strong feelings about it.
Do I sense general agreement at the high school being the middle model?
Yes.
That's what I've sensed.
What works best in terms of the real, I don't know if there is a best, but the real activities that are involved for high schools, putting them in the middle tier works best for
I think that
their
does. Our first proposal a
athletics.
month ago was high school in the middle, elementary first, and middle school at the end. And I want to show you the marks on my back from that proposal. The issue was to make the logistics work. If you started elementary school at 7:30, parents were very concerned about students waiting in the dark for the bus and that early start time. That was really the most negative criticism on that. The other was that some of their kids would get home and there wouldn't be an older sibling there to take care of them. So that was the negative. That doesn't mean it's wrong, that's just was the negative. That sort of shot it out of the water. That was loud, just like this one was. So it wasn't different. And so if you move it to 7:45 to get more palatable, then your middle school is going to go to 4:30, and then the middle school, when that's too late, my kid wouldn't get home from practice till 6 o'clock. So some of that's logistics that we can deal with. I think what we'd really like to start to have the discussion about is, what do you think is the best order? And then if that's the best order, that's what you want to work at. How can we start to play with those numbers and get some routing issues? For example, the high school and middle school are 7-hour and 10-minute days. Do they want to negotiate down to 7 hours and 5 minutes to give us a little more wiggle room? Can first student look at the turnover time between those? We can do those things.
I'll go out first and I'll say I think one of the clear indications is that high school doesn't go first. Okay, so starting from that proposition, that means high school is either second or third. We've talked about third. Third does not work very well because of the lateness of the exit and how that impacts upon before and after school activities. So what about second? That's kind of where I am with it. Middle school, I'm hearing from the teachers and the principals and the spokespeople that came up who seem to be willing to be either first or third. I'm not really hearing a lot. Third has gotten some pushback, but not as much as first.
Haven't heard too many volunteer for third.
Right. Nobody wants to be third. So if middle school were first, high school were second, we're still looking at elementary being third, which absolutely seems to go against what we've heard tonight, but not necessarily what we've heard at the World Cafe. So I think the question really becomes, how early is too early, and where is that cutoff as to how can we practically apply this if we're not going to have kids on the road at 5 o'clock in the afternoon